So what can you count on moving forward in the real estate world? Well, more sales are going to take place and more forms is going to come out from the BCFSA and other governing bodies that protect consumers in the real estate market and the real estate transactions. I'm Sergej with neuHouzz. Let's discuss a couple of new forms that's been introduced in the last few months. Well, if you've been part of a real estate transaction in the past, you've seen property disclosure statement form, a form that asks you a bunch of questions about the home you're trying to sell. For the buyers, it's an information that you can take a look and make your own judgment based on the answers provided by the seller if you need to do further due diligence. Some of the questions that you will see on the property disclosure statements are, is your home insulated? Is there any problems with the sewer? Are there any encroachments? Does the home has any material latent defects? All of that information is in question form, and then you have 4 options. Yes, it does. No, it's not. Do not know, and does not apply. Those are the answers that you can provide. It's not a mandatory form, but as a seller, and if you are especially the owner of the property, you should consider filling it out and not just strike across each page saying that home sold as is, you have not lived there, or property is tenanted. Well, if you are a landlord, if you're a property owner and property is tenanted, you probably know some information. So therefore, at least fill out the information that you do know, and then the rest provide answers I don't know, which would allow buyers to do their own due diligence. Recently, in BC Supreme Court, there was a case that actually was going through exactly the same exercise. Buyer was stating that seller misrepresented the property by not filling out the PDS. Well, it is not a mandatory document. So following that case, the BCFSA came out with 2 additional forms. When the seller opts out for not completing a property disclosure statement, they are now required to fill out property non-disclosure statement. Here, it's a very basic 2-sentence document that say seller opted not to fill out the property disclosure statement, but they confirm there's no MLDs. What's MLD? Material latent defects. What are those material latent defects? Well, Poly B has been considered as a material latent defect. Non-conforming suite, also MLD. Trusses that's been eaten by termites, that's broken, that's cracked, and it's not easily visible through a visual inspection. Those things need to be answered properly if you do know that information. Now, what happens if the property has been put on the market by an executor, by a trustee who is sitting in Vancouver, and they are selling a home for an estate in Okanagan? They probably never lived in that home and they don't have a lot of information. So therefore, they are going to strike through the PDS form and indicate that they never lived or their executor, therefore they don't know anything about that property. Now, the onus is on the selling realtor. For instance, as a representative, as a listing agent for an estate, I have to conduct a thorough walkthrough of the property before it goes on the market. If the executor going to opt out for crossing out a PDS, now I'm obligated to fill out a new form, a realtor's disclosure of material latent defects. So for instance, if I did a walkthrough and I've noticed that there's a Poly B, I noticed that there is a suite in there and I can't find any documentation with the municipality that it's a conforming legal suite, that is considered MLD. I've noticed that maybe there's termites in the property. Yes, I do have to fill out a realtor's disclosure of material latent defects. So guys, don't get surprised next time when the realtor whips out even more forms, because we already know that there's a tons of forms. Therefore, disclosure upon disclosure and then upon another disclosure, but 2 more forms being introduced. All of that is to protect you as a consumer. All of that is to give you a full picture of the property so you can roll through the due diligence process with ease. And the bigger thing is too, please remember that when you as a homeowner filling out a property disclosure statement, try to be accurate. I've seen and I've been part of the transactions when working with the buyers, we noticed that the homeowner who purchased the property 2 years ago and they've been renting it they opted out for not filling it out, it actually made the buyer extremely furious. They were extremely upset that the seller, who was not living in the property, they were in Alberta and they were selling in the Okanagan, they didn't want to fill out any information about that home. It does make the buyer a little uncomfortable, in some cases a lot. And in that particular case, they walked away from the really good house. So therefore, working with a strong agent, you will completely understand these forms. They are completely harmless. Of course, as realtors, we are not allowed to represent sellers who wants to conceal important situation to the buyers. That is a legal no-no. We expose ourselves, go into a real estate jail. We expose you to liability as our clients, and therefore, that is a very sensitive issue. And you have to, as a homeowner, when you opt out to hide something, and if you believe that it's okay to hide, you should get a legal advice from your lawyer how to proceed forward. I'm Sergej from neuHouzz. Please remember, who you work with does matter.